live once again with another Brand Doctor podcast episode. And today we have Jonathan Parker, the man when it comes to conversation. And I was telling Jonathan offline that it is my mission in life to help folks create better relationships with their significant others, their friends, their family, but from a business standpoint, create better relationships with their clients, with their audience, with their target audience. And Jonathan here today is going to help us create better conversations, not better, extraordinary, remarkable conversations with who it is that we want to interact with. And without further ado, I want to introduce Jonathan Parker to the show. What is going on, my friend?
It's going awesome, man. Thank you so much for having me. Since we connected, what was that, a couple weeks ago?
Weeks ago, through Tyler Harris, our man.
He's on a plane, or he just landed, I think, in Vegas or something like that.
That's right.
So it's been awesome, and your items you're putting out, the content, the value about branding and being true to yourself has been inspiring, empowering. So I cannot thank you enough for allowing me to join in on this conversation.
Oh, dude, my pleasure. I was so excited to have you on. I was pissed that I had to reschedule it, but I was like, you know what? Let's make it happen. We will make this happen. And here
it
we
was
are.
going to happen, and it won't be the only conversation either. So
I agree.
Conversation, it's no good.
So let's dive in. I want people to understand your background a little bit. I want to build up your credibility. I want people to understand why they should be listening to Jonathan Parker. So can you give us sort of the backstory a little bit?
Yeah, of course. You know, one of these things that's amazing is you don't think about your story until you're looking back on your story. Like when you're in the moments, you don't actually understand how it all comes together. And really, I think I need to record my mother telling like the intro story, right? Because my mother and father had to live it. And my mom might even be watching. Like my grandmother, she goes and has lunch with my grandmother all the time. So if mom and grams are watching, what's up? So here's the backstory. When I was born, I was sick. I was sick. I had seizures. I had double ear infections. And I didn't talk well, didn't talk coherently or clearly. I made sounds and had piecemeal words, but almost to like 4 or 5. And talking was something my mom and my dad had to really work with me on. And this was, you know, in the 80s. So this was before speech therapists everywhere. And I grew up in a small town in Connecticut. So my mother was the one who was not going to accept the diagnosis from some of the doctors, like, oh, he may not ever talk. He may never talk well. And she just worked with me on it. And even though speaking came later to me, it wasn't ever going to be an excuse for my parents, right? Difficulties and challenges were never allowed to be excuses for my parents. So I was sick as a child. And then I was sick in like upper elementary school and middle school. And I was sick in high school. I was sick in college. I've had, you know, issues with some of my organs. I've had severe asthmatic, massive allergies that would just leave me just stuck inside, not being able to go outside. But even though you're sick, the one thing that you can still do is run your mouth, right? And I fell in love with talking to people. But again, it goes back to that idea of story. When you're good at something for a long time, you take it for granted. You don't think about it as being a skill or a gift, more a gift than anything. So I started talking in front of people when I was in 6th grade. Now, rumor has it, according to my mother and grandmother, I used to set up stuffed animals in my little playroom when I was in elementary school and like preach at them and, you know, let them know what's up. I wish there was now. Don't you wish there was video content of that? Because then you could like flash to that, and that would be golden right there. Who knows the words I was using back then. So, but you're going through, and I always loved talking in front of people. I just loved it. And so I'm going through in high school and in college, I was sick and all of these things were going on, yet opportunities to continue to stand in front of people and talk and engage in conversations kept happening, but I never noticed it as a potential gift to the world, a way to provide value to people. And then going on about 3.5 years ago, I was down in Florida at a conference, and like a traditional 29-year-old trying to figure out life, all I knew how to do was complain and be ungrateful at the time. And my wife and I are sitting with 2 new friends. He was the keynote speaker at this conference, and I'm just whining and complaining about life. And after about 45 minutes, he does the universal sign of like, get me out of this conversation. You know, he starts like holding his iPad and leaning back. And he cuts me off right in the middle of one of my sentences. And he says, how many years are you going to waste waiting for permission to do what you know you should be doing? And it just took me back, you know, like punch in the chest. And I said, what did you say? And he said, how many years are you going to waiting for permission to do what you know you should be doing? And it was that pivotal moment, right? It just altered the trajectory of my life, and I never even saw it coming. So I pull out of that conference with my wife, Jessica, and I said, hey, I'm gonna go after 2 things. One was this public initiative I wanted to start, but the second piece was I wanted to learn everything I could about a conversation. And I spent 2 years reading books, listening to TED Talks, listening to podcasts, looking up programs, watching myself talk, talking to other people about how I talk. You know, I learned things like, yeah, you're great at asking questions, but you're a terrible listener, or you're an oversharer, or you're not actually sharing what you think, you're sharing what somebody told you, you're parroting somebody else. And I'm learning all of these things. I'm writing this diary down, and it's chicken scratch here, chicken scratch there. But the one conclusion I came to was that everyone wanted me to be somebody else in a conversation. Follow these 10 steps to a conversation, these 5 critical points. And I just wanted to be me. I wanted to give myself permission to be me, but a me who is always a work in progress. So I took in all this information, absorbed it, and then dreamed and thought. And I said, if I wanted to see myself as a conversationalist, what are the 4 categories I need? What are the 5 categories, 6 categories? And I whittled it down to something that I thought was going to be personal for me. And then in May 2016, I was asked to teach a group of interns. And my immediate thought was, I don't know. Like, I've never taught this before. I've learned so much. I don't know. But I ended up doing it. And 2 of my friends from the community from Greenville, South Carolina, were in the room. And halfway through, I took that little intermission break so everyone could go get some more water and coffee. And after 45 minutes of hearing it, they're like, hey, we're going to hire you. We want you to come do it for our company. And I said, why don't you listen to the second part to make sure you like it? Just to make sure, I mean, you know, first 45 minutes, I could have, you know, faked it really good. But then after that was the end of May. By the end of June, I had my first client. And really since then, I've been working with companies, organizations, nonprofits, for business, large, small, keynote speaking, one-on-one development, all on the idea that everyone is an artist. Everyone is a vocal artist. And the words that come out of your mouth, they paint an invisible picture that not only captures the subject in which you are discussing, but is a direct reflection of you. So the conversation is the invisible imprint of who you are, what you think, and how you are remembered. But we have lost the art, one, and how we do it. We've lost the art of how, and we've lost the what we create. And my whole life, I feel like, builds to every time I stand in front of somebody to talk about conversations or get on a video, whether it's on Facebook or on a podcast, because conversations is the driving force of everyone. And that's how we're remembered.
Oh my God, I love it. What a great introduction. See, guys, now do you understand why I had to have Jonathan on the show? I mean, seriously. So here's something that I want to ask you, because I've been like, how do I was just getting anxious because I couldn't wait to ask this question. When I was watching you and Tyler, you guys were talking about the particular questions that will lead to better conversation.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to share that with my audience, because I found it so profound and so insightful.
Yeah. This idea of questions. So there's 4 major parts of conversation for me, right? The canvas of every conversation is curiosity, right? You're not going to talk about something unless you're curious about it. The canvas is curiosity. And then the paint we use to color with are questions, listening, and sharing. Obviously, there are words underneath all of those categories, but those are the big categories in a conversation. Questions, listening, and sharing are your paint. And the first color that goes on the canvas, or should go on the canvas, is questions. And we live in a time and in a culture now where it's this idea of like question everything, question everything, question everything. And there's a way to think about it, right? Our good friend Simon Sinek, right? He asks these big why questions. And these why questions need to be philosophically based. Like why questions are good in philosophical things. Like why does your company exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? Why do you think the way you think, right? Philosophical. Yet when why questions enter the relational conversational time, it's kryptonite, it's toxic, it is terrible, because we need to ask what and how questions, not why questions. Why needs to stay in the realm of philosophy. What and how need to stay in the realm of relationships. And let me tell you why. Why questions are arming to people, right? Most people go through life, right? Fists up or fists out, right? They're ready to defend from a fight or start a fight. And why questions do that. I mean, just think about it. If I walked into a room and said, why did you do that? Why do you think that? Why would you go and do that? Why aren't you here? Why are you late? You are asking people to defend themselves or go on the offense against you, right? Defend themselves like, oh, I don't know, it's just difficult. Or on the offense, it's like, who are you, right? Relationally, just think when you're talking to your spouse or significant other and you're like, why are you late? Why didn't you pick up the groceries, right? You're asking them to arm themselves to go on the offense or defense. But what and how questions? What and how questions invite the conversation. They invite the conversation. So letting people answer the question like, hey, what happened that led you not to be able to be here on time? Or, hey, help me understand it. How did this meeting go? Because I don't feel like it went well. The what and how questions actually invite you into the conversations, where why questions are so arming. Now, I understand why questions need to be there philosophically, right? They need to answer that kind of meta question. But when you're talking to someone, what and how questions are game changers because you're inviting them into the conversation. And in a world, in a culture that's so used to either being on the offense or the defense, when somebody gets a what and how question, all of a sudden you've earned credibility with that person. You've shown them that you have value with them. And it totally changes the vocal art, the conversations in which you're going to have.
I love it because it reminds me of, and I talk about this a lot in my communication and my content, where if you could choose two places to sit between you and your potential client, right? Would you sit across the desk?
Okay. Or
would you sit next to them?
That's good.
What do you think is going to provide a better connection, a more intimate connection, a more emotional connection? In right. What position? And I love that I love challenge, right? And I love Simon too, man. I've read his book 1,000 times. I've seen him speak. Like I could listen to that guy for hours, right? Yeah. But I like that you challenge. You're not really challenging it. You're just saying the why needs to be there, but it right. needs to be in this room where the what and the how is what's really going to create that emotional connection with whoever it is that you're speaking with.
Exactly.
I love it. No, I think this is fantastic stuff. So where do we get tripped up? Is it just because we are selfish little creatures that we forget to ask the what and the how? Like, why don't we ask more of the what and the how?
Well, some of it comes down to what I believe are the two deepest desires that all of us share. So I believe that all of us, universal, of age, gender, race, nationality, just universally, we share these two desires. And it's one, to have the opportunity to communicate, and two, the respect to be heard. Right. So everybody is looking for the opportunity to communicate, and everybody's looking for the respect to be heard. And why questions almost force that for us, right? It's like that force quit button on your computer. When you ask a why question, you know, almost subconsciously, you're going to get the opportunity to communicate. You're just going to. Because when you ask the why, you know, you get to explain your why. And then a why question also gives you the illusion, because it's not accurate, it gives you the illusion that that person's going to respect you enough to listen. but it allows us to feel like we're getting these desires answered. So I don't think it's so much selfishness as it is almost desperation. It's almost a desperation to get these desires fulfilled, to be able to have the true opportunity to communicate and respect to be heard. So the initial thing that trips us up is we're desperate creatures. We're desperate for communication. We're desperate for conversation. We're desperate for relational connection. We're longing for it. And some of us are hungry. Other of us are just malnourished, right? We haven't had a relational connection and a conversation in so long that all we know how to do is argue on this philosophical why level where we're fighting and we're arguing, we're debating. So some of it is these desires have not been met for so long that we don't understand that we need to ask these what and hows. So that's one thing that trips us up. The second thing that trips us up is we think we know a lot and we want to put that on display for everybody. And we are so uncomfortable with just saying, hey, you know what? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. So what and hows indicate that you don't know something. Whys indicate a desire that you want to argue about a philosophical something that has no objective reality to it. Where if I says, hey, what makes that work? I'm indicating to you, I don't know what makes that work. I'm indicating to you that I need to learn. Which, think about it. Can you value a person any more than by saying, hey, will you tell me what you know best so that I can learn from you? Like what and how questions are those value questions.
Yeah.
And that's really what trips it up. We don't want to admit we don't know. But the moment you free yourself from not being the expert on everything is the moment conversation just springs to life.
Oh God, it goes back to that little saying, right? If you want to be the most interesting in the room, be the most interested.
Correct.
Yeah, my father-in-law told me that years ago, and I was like, wow, because I was the epitome of what you were describing, because my mother, she would come in the room and light the room up, whether there's 2 people or 500 people. And that, God rest her soul, that was the one characteristic that she did give me that I cherish, because my father's very quiet. He's very by himself. He's very, introverted. You get him open once in a while, but majority of the time, but he's very strategic. He's very so I get the best of both worlds.
Right.
However, I always thought that, to be the best, you had to get out there and you had to be the loudest in the room. But things are changing.
No doubt.
The world is changing. And to be the most interested, man, the light bulb went off in my head when you said, what better position to put yourself in is to ask the what and how, because you're immediately, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, the other person's like, wow, this guy doesn't, or this gal doesn't think that they're a know-it-all.
Exactly.
And you just get them to open up, and now that conversation sprouts into a beautiful relationship. I mean, now listen, it could go the other way too, right?
100%. No doubt.
So you're going to connect, you're not going to connect. It's not the end of the world. Keep it moving.
And if you don't connect, though, you didn't connect on a relational level, but you didn't do the damage of arguing on a philosophical level.
Right.
So it's okay not to connect with everyone. But what you don't want is to be remembered as the person who disconnects with everyone. So you go into this networking event, or you're with a potential client, or you're with, just friends, and they invite their friends, those awkward dinners where you're like, oh, you brought people I didn't know. And there's a difference between not connecting and intentionally disconnecting. And there's plenty of people I don't connect with in conversations, but I never walk away thinking, man, that was terrible and toxic, or man, they're a jerk. And hopefully they didn't walk away thinking that of me. Why? Because just because we don't connect doesn't mean that we disconnect.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And you always, that's true optimism right there. I mean, it's true optimism. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, we all know we're not going to be able to connect with everyone.
Right.
We're not going to be able to please everyone. But I love your approach. Why? Because the positioning, you're setting yourself up for great positioning. And I believe branding is all about proper positioning.
Exactly.
How do you want to be perceived? What is the experience you want your client or your audience to feel, and just be part of? And so the conversation is the beginning of it all. So this is so valuable. So as we turn the corner, we start to wrap up. What are some things, right, that our audience can do immediately, starting today,
right,
to help empower the conversation? I know it's a broad term, but it's a big question. I know. I tend to ask these types of.
I like big questions because then I get to answer it.
Yeah. So, what are some things that they could do to just change the game immediately?
Exactly. Okay. So how about I just hit all 4 categories so they get a taste of all of it, right? So if I believe the conversation is curiosity, questions, listening, and sharing, just let's look at those 4 categories and do one thing that you can go out right now. I mean, while you're watching it, you can switch this. I tell all my clients, the art of the conversation is not meant to be thought about. It's meant to be done, right? So if you bring me in, we're going to get to work. We're not going to think about working. We're not going to have 45 minutes thinking about having better conversations. We're just going to do better conversations. Okay. So the canvas to every conversation is curiosity. And here's the big takeaway here. We've heard for way too long that curiosity killed the cat, just way too long. And now all of a sudden curiosity is this terrible thing. Don't be curious. Don't go after anything. Pretend you know everything. And if you don't know it, avoid it. And this is what you have to understand. Curiosity might have killed the cat, but what if the cat got stronger? What if curiosity made the cat stronger? So the first thing you can do in a conversation or getting ready for a conversation is realize that the act of curiosity, appropriately so, right, and reasonably so, the act of curiosity will make you stronger. I just believe that. I just believe that if you position yourself and have the posture of being curious about what you don't know and learning more about what you do know, you will become stronger. And I believe that curiosity being the canvas of every conversation, if entered in with the idea of I'm going to be strong, right? You and I are going to be stronger after this conversation. You and I are going to be stronger because we were curious about one another. We were curious about these topics. So in curiosity, realize it's going to make you stronger. Now, when you're talking about the paint, right? When you're talking about what you paint with, questions, what and how over why, right? We spent time talking about this. Ask what and how questions over why questions, because those are the relational, connective questions that allow you to engage in the conversation. But I just want to go a little deeper on that. When somebody asks you a why question, you need to learn how to disarm. So you're in control of the questions you ask. You're in control of the questions you ask. You only are going to ask what and how. And the question I always get after this is, what happens when someone asks me a why question? Like, what do I do? And here's what you do. You need to learn how to disarm a why question. And here's how you disarm a why question. You restate their question. So when someone says, why did you do that? You say, hey, that's a good question. What I hear you saying is, what led to that happening? Okay? And people always say, well, doesn't that sound demeaning? And I say, no, it doesn't. Because the person's going to go, yeah, that's what I mean. And what you've just done is you've disarmed the fight. And now you can have a conversation.
You are incredible.
Thank you. So disarm a why question. That could be from your boss. That could be from a peer. That could be from your spouse, significant other. It could be from your mom or dad. It could be from your kids. Disarm the why question. Just because somebody else came to ready to fight doesn't mean you got to engage. So you ask what and how questions, but when somebody asks you a why question, restate it as a what and how in a way that lets that person know you want to have a conversation. You want to have a conversation. So curiosity questions, listening. Here's the big thing with listening. Listen for opportunity before drawing attention. Listen for opportunity before drawing attention. Because all of us are trying to get these desires fulfilled of having the opportunity to communicate and the respect to be heard, it's so fast to draw attention back to ourselves. So fast just to tell our side of the story, to kind of spin that spotlight on us. If you're looking for a funny person talking about this, Brian Regan, stand up, I Walked on the Moon, free on YouTube. just look up his dinner conversation or dinner time or something like that. Absolutely brilliant about wisdom teeth. He's funnier than I am. I won't try to parrot his jokes. But this idea of it's so easy for us to draw attention back to ourselves. What we really need to do is look for opportunities to connect with that person, right? It's probably what you do in your business with brand. You're looking for more opportunities to connect, more opportunities for you to be able to engage your customers and your clients. And that's the same thing in conversations. People are looking for opportunities to connect, but because our mind's so situated on getting attention back to ourselves, we miss their doors, kind of their breadcrumbs to better opportunity. So when you're listening, don't listen for how you can enter or how they can enter your story. Listen for the opportunity, how you can enter theirs. And then lastly, with sharing, when you share, and we talked about this, I think with Tyler, but if not, it's key. We live in a world of prescribed authenticity. We're not really ourselves. We're putting on we've taken a prescription so that we fit some category, some group, some level of acceptance. We've prescribed an authenticity on ourselves. It's the equivalent of like we put on clothes we saw on a mannequin and then we put them on and it doesn't just fit quite right. Why? Because mannequins are meant to be boring and mediocre, and they're meant to be prescribed to the clothes. Prescribed authenticity will rob you of any true longevity in conversations. It's counterfeit art. Like prescribed authenticity is counterfeit art. You are the only you. That means the words coming out of your mouth, the conversations you have are uniquely yours. So starting to strip off that prescribed authenticity. And if you don't know something, just say you don't know. And if you believe something passionately, share it with passion. If you don't believe it that passionately, tone it back. Just be you. So curiosity will make you stronger. Disarm a why question. Listen for opportunity and avoid prescribed authenticity and be the true, complete, authentic you.
Oh my God. I cannot wait to listen to this episode back. You have no idea.
Man, thank you.
I've been doing that lately, and I find it to be extreme, because you see me going a mile a minute over here, as you can see. I'm swiping, I'm doing camera angles, and I'm listening.
People don't know how hard it is to get the bald head lit well, man. They don't get it.
But man, when I listen back, you pick up on things that you might have slipped by. But man, when I tell you, this is a wealth of information. And so I want to challenge the folks that are listening and watching this podcast today to execute and actually implement some of this. This is so, I'm not going to call it simple, but this is practical.
Exactly.
That is practical strategy that he is giving you today, Jonathan, that is going to help you tremendously build a better conversation. And when you can build a better conversation, you're going to build a better business. Bottom line. I mean, Frank Vuono said it yesterday on our podcast. He said, when you build great relationships with people, it allows you opportunities that you would not have if you did not build that relationship. For example, if things get tight, right? Money, financial, whatever, right? You can go to a client and say, hey man, you mind advancing us next month's pay because, we're just in a jam. Now this is a big company. They could do that if they wanted. Sure. You guys are great. You guys deliver. Thank you so much. No problem. Here's your advance. But if you didn't have that conversation built on that level, right? God forbid things got tough and things got tight, right. And you didn't have that connection. Would you be able to ask for that advance? Probably not. So I want people to understand that if you create better conversation, you're going to create better brand. You're going to create better business. And this is what Jonathan has spent the last 30 minutes talking to us about. And I just want you to execute and implement this stuff because it is powerful. It is powerful stuff. So Jonathan, for folks that want to get to know you more and to learn more about your journey and what you do and how you help people and businesses, where can we find you?
So you find me on all of the normal platforms, right? The website's thejonathanrparker.com, Facebook, The Jonathan R. Parker, Instagram, The Jonathan R. Parker, Twitter, at Talk with Jonathan. And then YouTube, launch the YouTube channel, the Jonathan R. Parker. And that is going to be a place where I provide value and content about conversations, about better ways to engage in all of these categories we talked about. But the other thing I'm super excited about is I'm creating a diary for my boys. A video a day of me having conversation with my 3 boys, because they're so young, they don't care what I think. And it's my conversation with them, not trying to take anything for granted. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the Jonathan R. Parker, and you can find me on all those platforms having a conversation. So I'd love for you to join in.
Oh man, that's awesome. Talk about brand consistency there. Just wanted to make a little note of that. So
I learned some of that from following you, and I was like, okay, I can't have 18 different names out there.
No,
Jonathan R. Parker.
That's brilliant stuff. And again, very practical, very simplistic. People want simple. People want the truth, and they want simple. Those are the 2 big things. And so, guys, there you have it. Another podcast episode in the books for you guys. Jonathan, thanks so much for coming on the show again.
Henry, thanks for having me. I'm beyond grateful. And for everyone listening, thank you for tuning in.
Oh, excellent stuff, man. So I'm going to start today with my wife to start asking more what and why questions.
What and how?
What and how. I'm sorry. What and how questions. Oh my God. My head's spinning. That's how excited I am.
That's great.
But I will definitely, so I'll get this show wrapped up for you, and I'll get you some really great media to help promote this conversation, because it's fantastic. So real quick, guys, before I forget, if you haven't shared this podcast with a friend or colleague, I invite you to do that now. And if you haven't written a quick little written review on iTunes, I appreciate it and thank you in advance for that. I will continue to bring you the heat and bring you as much value as I possibly can when it comes to building your business and building your brand and positioning you as a subject matter expert. So have an awesome day, guys, and I will catch you on the next episode.